It's an honour, as always, to stand in this House to represent the great people of Timmins, James Bay. I feel as well, speaking of their concerns about the issues of affordability and fairness. And for those at home who are watching, who are from ridings like my own, very rural, a lot of senior citizens, to see the flip-flopping and the backflips from the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party, their desire that we do not debate this. The Liberals said right off the bat that they thought that it was very unfortunate we were debating this. They talk about the issues of choice, that, you know, we shouldn't interfere in the wonderful marketplace. It's the same argument I'm hearing from the Conservatives, the mythical land of Adam Smith, where we have the little baker and we have the little blacksmith, and the market all regulates itself. And then, of course, we have the little banker and the big dread hand of government coming in and squeezing down. My colleague from the Liberals talked about this creation of a nanny state. It shows, Mr. Speaker, the incredible disconnect between the Liberals and the Conservatives on what's happening with real Canadians right now in 2014. We have the highest record of household debt ever at 166%. We have mortgage debts over $1.1 trillion. We have consumer credit debt has reached $500 billion. Mr. Speaker, average debt for average person is now about $30,000. Now, this includes their credit card debt. It also includes their student loans, their car payments. So the issue when people are being gouged by the banks, it hurts. My colleagues keep talking. They're twisting themselves into knots today to try and hide behind high school economics textbooks as opposed to talking about what's happening in the real world. Mr. Speaker, when my daughters went down to Toronto to go to school, they tried to get bank accounts. And I'll tell you, they were not interested. The banks weren't interested in their business. You needed this form, you needed that form. So they had to get support back home through the Caisse Populaire. Thank God the Caisse Populaire was there to represent them. But it means that when they're in Toronto, they do their banking with their ATM cards because they don't have the banking services at hand. In many of our regions, the banks have pulled out because they're making record dollars, Mr. Speaker. They're made over, was it $29 billion in profits? $29.4 billion in profits. Of that, they're making $420 million in ATM fees. It's not worth them servicing the little towns. It's not worth them servicing senior citizens, so they will stick them with the ATM machine. Now, my colleagues in the Liberals and Conservatives say, well, people have a choice. It's this whole false word of choice. The consumer has a choice when suddenly they don't have banking services. When they have to go and they have to get money out and it costs them $40 and they're getting dinged sometimes $7 on hidden fees. Now, my colleagues in the Conservatives and the Liberals, they say, well, people could make an informed choice, as though they think that people are stupid and lazy, that people just don't bother to look at the screen. Well, when you look at the screen and it says it's going to cost you $2.25 to take out your own money, the screen doesn't tell you about the hidden fees. So people are being ripped off and people are being gouged. My colleagues in both the Conservatives and the Liberals talk about how if we do any efforts to help consumers, the whole system is going to collapse. Oh, my God. The ATM business is going to run out of business. We're going to have intervened in the marketplace, the dread marketplace, which the Conservatives, by the way, intervene in any time they feel like it'll help their friends in the oil patch. They're more than willing to intervene in the marketplace. But when it comes to helping senior citizens who are getting gouged $7 to take $40 out to buy their groceries, oh, my God, the dread hand of the socialists stepping in. Well, Mr. Speaker, let's look at other markets. I was just in the United Kingdom where they don't have ATM fees. There's no shortage of ATM machines. They're all over the place. You look all over Europe where they've dealt with this. Now, this isn't to say that there shouldn't be a fee, because it is a service and people pay for a service. But the question is when you go to an ATM and the regular account fee is $1. So $1 on $40, okay, well, that seems fair. And then you get the network access fee. Well, they're not telling you about the network access fee. Well, that's another $1.90 on top of that. So now it's $2.90. And then there's the convenience fee. Oh, another $5. Now, both the Conservatives and the Liberals have been saying, oh, this is so important. We have to protect this concept of convenience. But they don't tell the consumer, when you go to your local corner store and you don't have a bank and you're trying to get $40 out, that the convenience It's not a convenience to you. It's a convenience to the bank because they're getting 40% off you. That's a ripoff. It's a gouge. But you can't hear them say that. They'll say anything else other than it's a gouge because, you know, their heart, fundamentally, is with the people who are doing the gouging. That's where they feel more comfortable. If people are getting gouged, well, that's the wonders of the market. That's the great thing about consumer choice. If you have no bank and that's where you have to go and you get gouged, well, isn't capitalism a beautiful thing? We should all hug it on every single day. But, Mr. Speaker, we've seen the failure of the big banks to live up to the social contract, to represent fairness. They can still have record profits, and they will still have record profits. But, Mr. Speaker, I find it unconscionable that in this day and age, someone could be charged $7 to take $20 out. Now, Mr. Speaker, the consumers, you know, the Liberals have never pretended to be consumer friendly, so I'm not even going to worry too much about them. But we see the Conservatives have suddenly had, you know, they've been on the road to Damascus and they've suddenly thought, you know, consumer issues are important. Let's take out some TV ads. We'll beat up the telecoms. We won't do anything about it, but we'll make them the enemy. But we won't do anything. So we have the finance minister, the big tough finance minister, who was going to go in and read the Riot Act to the banks. Do you remember that in 2007? And Toronto Star editorial said for several months the finance ministers told the banks he's not satisfied with their explanations. And whatever they do, those banks owe consumers some answers. So then, of course, he went in March of 2007. It was his big showdown with the banks. He was gonna stand up for consumers. Oh, sure, he stood up all right, Mr. Speaker. He came out like a schoolboy after seeing the nuns. And we never heard anything more about it after that. The banks continued on. So what we're talking about, Mr. Speaker, is the rightful place of the federal government. The federal government has a role. This isn't interfering in the market. It's about establishing certain standards of fairness. Now, what we've seen with continual deregulation is that this idea that if you deregulate, if you allow the industries to look after themselves, there'll be more choice and prices will drop. But we actually don't see prices dropping. We see prices going up because they can gouge more. And because we have a government that doesn't want to stand up for consumers, the gouging gets higher and higher. And I've tried to get my colleagues on the other side, they always have, you know, the price elasticity. At what point does the whole market fall apart? I haven't heard the elasticity of this government's backbone on at what point does the gouging become unacceptable. Personally, I think when you're up at $5 on a convenience fee on top of the other $1.09 and the other dollar that you're being charged, that's an unacceptable addition, Mr. Speaker. So what we're talking about here is some very simple practical steps. It's getting more and more difficult for people in my community to get by. For young people who are paying $50,000 on their student loans coming out of school, that's an enormous burden that wasn't there when my generation was at the university age. For senior citizens who are getting ripped off with their hydro rates in Ontario and paying through the nose for their own hydro, when Ontario creates the cheapest hydro in the world, dumps it on other markets, and then forces senior citizens in Northern Ontario to pay through the nose so that we can cover off the fact that the Liberals decided that they would gouge consumers for $1 billion for two gas plants in their own backyards. I mean, Mr. Speaker, people in my region think that that's criminal. That when I have to tell a senior citizen that they can't pay their hydro bills because of the Liberal smart meters, well, in Northern Ontario, a smart meter has become pretty clear how dumb it is. But when people are paying double what they paid for electricity, when we know we're creating it in Northern Ontario at 5 and 6 and 7 cents a kilowatt hour, and you're paying 40 cents for it, that's people being gouged. So do people want a little bit of fairness? They certainly do, Mr. Speaker. When they go to the banks, they want to know that the dollars that they have in their pension check or on their savings, that it's going to stretch as far as it can go. So I'm asking my honourable colleagues to do the right thing, to think of the people back home and say, you know what, as they say in the big McDonald's ads, you deserve a break today. But I doubt you're going to hear it from the government, and you're definitely not going to hear it from the Liberals, Mr. Speaker. They're going to shove that Big Mac of consumer choice down your throat. But I would say that let's do the right thing and give people a break, give them a break on these outrageous gouging and ATM fees.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister.